Hello, I'm Bob the Bookerer and welcome to my channel. I'm finally back home yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the books that I've been reading this week, but I hope you are doing really well. I don't know if it's just me, but almost everybody I've spoken to seems to be having a significantly busier January and February than like previous years. And I don't know if everyone collectively has just decided that this year we're just all going to go a little bit more all out than ever before. But yeah, I hope you're hanging in there okay. And let's get started chatting about some of the books that I've been reading this week. So firstly, a wonderful bit of coincidence meant that I hadn't actually mentally associated the fact that I was reading two books, both translated by the same person, in this case, Jennifer Croft. And it's one of those things where I think part of the reason I hadn't made the connection that she'd translated both is just because one is in Argentinian Spanish and one of them is in Polish. And typically, you wouldn't necessarily expect a translator to be as proficient in both of those. So it's kind of testament to her that, that's a thing. And, I'm also for next week going to be reading her book, her novel itself, The Extinction of Irina Ray. So I'm going to read that next. But anyway, keeping on with the Jennifer Croft love train, let's first go to Two Sherpas by Sebastián Martínez Daniell. And he writes really interesting. This book, I think, just is so interesting in so many ways. The core idea, as the name suggests, is that there are two Sherpas who are assisting with a trip up Mount Everest. Makes it sound like a very delightful thing. They're going on an expedition up Mount Everest, and it's to support these two British men, or this group of British men. But in the time that they are talking about this, they also have all of these flashbacks of really processing the wider context of what it means to be a Sherpa. And so as a result, this book goes a lot into conversations around colonialism, and particularly the ideas of the men who are typically men who climb the mountain are kind of paraded around and lauded as doing the most amazing things, and their Sherpas are often overlooked in some of those stories. Meanwhile, the Sherpas are taking on quite a big risk to themselves in order to make money for people who are incredibly wealthy. So it's this kind of idea of, for some people it's like a fun expedition, and for Sherpas this is a day-to-day job, and it's one that comes with a lot of risk. And so what this book kind of does is, right at the beginning, we are introduced to one of the Sherpas basically coming across the body of a British man who's been trying to climb the mountain. And from there spirals all of these thoughts about what to do next. Do we save them? Do we try to do a proper burial? Do we do any, whatever? And all of that kind of goes into this wider conversation about, like I mentioned, the kind of history of mountain climbing, and particularly of climbing Everest. And even at one point, sort of makes a point that Everest is in theory the tallest, but also kind of not, because like the highest versus sea level, maybe not, all these sorts of things. And so it kind of just explores this idea of why are people so drawn to doing this. And it's kind of such an odd idea in some ways to have as your central premise of a novel, but it really works in this book. I think it kind of has this sort of dark humor, but also really sort of careful, complex understanding of this that I just thought was really compelling and really interesting. And it's told in these very short chapters a lot of the time. There are 100 chapters in the book. Some of them are, a page long, like sort of, this, like is just one chapter here. But some of them are longer, and it sort of, as a result, has this kind of very episodic, dreamlike quality at times that I just thought was really interesting. Next up, I've not finished it yet, but I kind of wanted to mention it while I was talking about the other Jennifer Croft translated book, Flights by Olga Tokarczuk. So winner of the International Booker a bit ago, and we're very soon going to be hitting International Booker territory again. And I don't know why I said that with such fear. It's going to be a very exciting time. But Olga Tokarczuk is such an interesting writer in the sense of the 4 books I think I've read of hers now, well, this being the 4th that I'm currently reading, are just on such broad and different topics, but all with these very compelling stories. I didn't get on with Books of Jacob, but, they are these really in-depth stories about something where she's really exploring the modern world through various sort of historical episodes. And so what she does a lot in Flights is takes this core idea of people traveling and going somewhere, but particularly the kind of weird liminal space of airports, or of the kind of the journey itself of being on a plane or whatever, and uses that to kind of probe the human psyche. So for example, she talks about you know, olden days travel and this idea of venturing off into a place and it not necessarily being secure, versus now of sort of getting into, paying a lot of money to get into a big metal bird in the sky and going off somewhere. And how sometimes, as a result, places like airports are these really odd liminal spaces that are kind of stateless. You're kind of trapped in them, but it's also a thing to do with freedom, and it's this kind of big exploration. And so really it's kind of a novel that has a very non-fiction feel to it at times. It doesn't really follow a traditional narrative structure at times. It seems to sort of play around and focus on a different episode and a different set of people and thinking about them in different ways. I just think this is a really compelling book. I see now, as soon as I said that I was thinking about reading Flights by Olga Tokarczuk, lots of people in the comments were like, oh, do it. You're going to really enjoy this. And yeah, I entirely see why. This book is it's a very weird and wonderful little book. That really takes some core ideas and plays around with them in this really fun way of what does it mean to travel? Why do we travel? Why are humans constantly feeling this need to travel and to move and to do new things? When really, we're sort of hunter-gatherer, we're not really hunter-gatherer societies in quite the same way. We're kind of slightly more settled. And why does traveling still feel so important when we've got so much around us? So yeah, I just really love the way she thinks. There's this real playfulness to this book at times, but a real intellectual seriousness that is fascinating. I kind of want to just have lunch with her and just talk to her. Well, just listen to her, really, because I just feel like she'd be fascinating. Yeah, really, really interesting book. Next up, I read a book that I think may well be in my books of the year already, The Night Alphabet by Joelle Taylor. I absolutely adored her poetry collection, Kunto, which I still think is one of... I've seen her perform it live twice, or parts of it live twice, and it's blown me away. And then, so The Night Alphabet, I was like, I'm so intrigued to see what happens when a poet like Joelle Taylor takes to novels, and it really works. I think there is it's a bit weird and wonderful. It kind of darts around quite a lot in terms of narrative, but in a way that is so compelling, I think. And the joy of having a poet writing something longer is that you still have this intensity of language that she is so brilliant at. She's amazing at finding really unconventional metaphors or similes or descriptions of things. So at one point somebody smiles and it's like the hem of a skirt, and I was just like, that's brilliant. It's so unexpected and it's so bizarre, but that entirely, I see where you're going with that. That's amazing. And the core idea of Night Alphabet really, well, it kind of plays around quite a lot, but it really explores a lot, particularly around gender, sexuality, gender-based violence, community and identity, and so many other things. For example, one passage is looking at incel men. There's another part of this book that is really focused on a community of women coming together. There's another, the opening part of the book really focuses on tattoos in this really visceral, interesting way of somebody taking these tattoos that are on their body and kind of wanting to infuse their tattoos with blood from their mother. Like it's really, it's so visceral and intense and incredible in so many ways. And I just think it's so well done. Yeah, I'm staggered by what has been done with this novel. I think it's really just remarkable. It's hard to describe because there is a plot, but it's not plot driven in a kind of conventional sense. You sort of just want to sit in every single sentence and let it completely consume you, because it's so vivid and visceral and real and raw. And there are some scenes in this book that are absolutely horrific to read, and some that are so beautiful and light and joyous. And all of that is, I think, entirely worth it in this book. You want this, you almost want this book to break your heart because she does it so beautifully. Yeah, it's one hell of a book, and I think we're going to be seeing this sort of darting around a few prizes and things this year. And if it doesn't, it's a travesty because I think this book is just an absolute, like, it's remarkable. I think it's a really beautiful and vital and thoughtful book. And last but not least, a book I really didn't expect to enjoy quite as much as I did, My Work by Olga Ravn. And the thing is, why I didn't really necessarily expect it is I struggled with The Employees. I didn't quite get it, which is her last book to be translated into English. I didn't get it, and I struggled with it, and I couldn't quite find a way into it. And some people seem to really love it, and I just didn't get what was happening. And this book, translated by Sophia, Hersi Smith and Jennifer Russell, is, I think, a really profound book about motherhood and about so many, the sort of wider idea of your identity and family and everything else being bound up together with work. So the My Work part of the title is doing a bit of heavy lifting here for several different ideas. And as you read the book, occasionally the title seems to start making a bit more sense. So it's not only my work in terms of her work of writing and her trying to squeeze in writing alongside having a child. There's also my work in the slightly possessive sense of what is mine, what can I hold on to versus the work that is other people's. There's the kind of work in this book about the sort of unseen and sort of often less respected labour of that often in a lot of heterosexual couples that women do, particularly when it comes to childcare. There's the child as her body of work. You know, she talks about sort of the pride she feels after this child is born. And that's something really interesting. But also where this book does something very very sort of surprising and interesting, I think, is the book is kind of two books to some degree. It's a set of diaries that we read from somebody called Anna, who takes up most of this book. And we also have somebody responding to her who we kind of assume is Olga Ravn, but also doesn't have to be, the sort of narrator. And their kind of contribution is to sort of say basically like, I see you, you know, it sounds like what you're doing is very difficult. And this person is reading these diaries months later after they've had their own child. And so they are caught up in the same processes. And they are dealing with some of the same things. And I just thought it was really profound, just the way that this book takes these ideas of the struggle for sort of recent mothers to really hold on to a sense of identity, because previously maybe their work was part of their identity, perhaps previously their wider friendship group was part of their identity, or their relationships in other senses. But as soon as they become a mother, there is an identity that's sort of pushed upon them, but also they are working, you know, often they are working less, or it takes a less substantial role in their life, or they are less able to see friends, or when they do see friends, it's still within the context of their kids hanging out or something like that. So there's something really profound in the way this book examines this, the kind of notions of how society often treats parents, particularly mothers, and how that can sometimes feel like a trap too as well. I just thought it was really cleverly done. Yeah. And particularly because I didn't really get on with The Employees, I had relatively low expectations for this, I have to admit, and then really enjoyed it. Parts of this book are also told as poems, which is sort of slightly unnerving at first, but kind of works. It sort of builds into this rhythm that you get used to in the book that I really quite enjoyed. So yeah, very, very interesting book. Anyhow, those are the books that I've read this week. I hope you're doing really, really well and holding in there and having a good week. I'm scheduling the live stream for soon. Life has been a lot. And take care, and I'll see you all soon. Thank you again, and have a wonderful week.